What's up, YouTube? It's tiny.sey, and I'm back with another YouTube video. So today I'm going to be talking about a video that I saw on TikTok. An influencer named Jenny Darling said that she would need $315,000 in order to have a child. There's two reactions that I think people can have to this sort of statement. Either they understand where she's coming from and they get it, or they think it's extreme and that she's asking for way too much. Okay. I think I want to talk about where society is as it comes to having a child. And that decision has increasingly become harder and harder and harder. And it's something that people are not jumping to do anymore. We see that the age of having a child and starting a family is getting further and further and further. And so I think there's also that other element of women considering how their life is going to change if they decide to have a child. And this influencer asking for $315,000 a year if her husband were to want a child is just an example of women planning and to an extreme, I guess, for the thought of having a child. Now, she doesn't even want to have a child in the first place. She doesn't really want that, but she'd be willing to do it with these sort of parameters. And so I think if she finds someone that's willing to do that, good for her, great. And otherwise, she doesn't really care. So, you know what I mean? It's not like she's forcing a guy. Like, she could find someone that doesn't want to have a baby. But if they love her and they want a baby, they're going to abide by what she wants. Let's get into where we are in society. Why are these extremes appearing, and why are we more cautious about having children as a woman, but also as partners? Having a child is obviously something that a woman has to do. And so I think the woman is always going to be the one that's more cautious about it and that's going to think a little bit harder about it. But traditionally, I don't think this was something that women had to think much about or hard about, because it was their role in society. Their role was to have children, take care of those children, take care of the household, cook, clean. All of these sort of things were feminine, and it's what we were meant to do. That was the traditional role of a woman. And so it wasn't something you would think a lot about. It's just what you had to do. But slowly in society, we saw a transition where they decided, oh, women and children need educations. They should be learning too. They're humans. They have brains, right? And so they started to send children and women off to get an education. And obviously with this, slowly and surely, women also were entering into the workplace, and they were allowed to have jobs. And this thing that was once traditionally a masculine role became something that women were allowed to take part in. And I don't think this was necessarily an easy or quick transition, but it was something that eventually happened because society shifted in that direction. And we still see that some men want their women to be traditional and not work a job. So we still see that this transition is not something that was just accepted in a blink of an eye, but with movements like the girl boss and all these sort of things where women were encouraged and pushed to start their own business, get their own job, have aspirations outside of having a family and getting married. We see that women are embracing this idea. We see that the modern woman it's not going to be as easy for her to just have a baby, because she has other roles that she can play. Her sole purpose in life is not just to have a baby, and women are realizing that there are other pleasures, there are other things that you can do in life that will bring you plenty of joy. And of course, you can decide to have a child and that can bring you joy. But the point is, there's other things that you can do. You can start a business, you can have a job, you can learn a bunch of languages, you could travel the world. You could do plenty of things that does not involve having a child. So I think that's one aspect as to why there might be a decline in women having children. And yeah, we see that there's a 20% drop in childbirth. Between 2007 and 2022, we see that there's a 23% drop in birth rates. And so I think there's a lot of factors. So one of them definitely is that sense that women have had this new independence and have been able to explore their masculine side and get jobs and be independent. And we know that it wasn't until 1974 that women were allowed to have their own bank account. So that's another fairly new thing. We are still exploring that side of us, and it's not something that's coming easily, especially with this war on feminine independence, with the red pill and the Andrew Tates of the world telling women to stay in their place and regressing us back to this time where women were not allowed to have aspirations outside of motherhood and taking care of a family.
Where the fuck I want. So I'm just my career.
Your career.
I'm passionate about it. So
a life without children is vapious, and it's inane and it's pointless. And you may sit here and think that your career matters, but the truth is that your job will fire you out. Women don't give a solitary shit. And when you're 52 and you're past it with no grandchildren in a house by yourself, and all your friends have grandchildren in this beautiful life, and you're sitting there by yourself, you think the fact that you could afford a few extra Gucci bags is going to genuinely make you feel happy? I was at my grandmother's 93rd birthday. I looked there. My grandmother had 9 children. I stood there and I looked at my 93-year-old grandmother, and there was a whole room full with maybe 70 people that came from that one woman. Isn't that remarkable? Nobody cared about her career. Nobody asked what job she did. Nobody asked how many times she went to the club. Nobody asked if she had time to go to festivals. No, you had 70 sentient beings, including myself, full of life from one woman who dedicated herself to being a mother and a good wife.
Do whatever the fuck I want. So I'm just...
Another aspect of motherhood and having children that is is a big point to consider is death during childbirth. In 2021, there are 32.9 deaths per 1,000 childbirths. And so we see that there is that slight risk of dying when you have a baby. And that's something that you have to think about, especially if you have certain health conditions or if you have a health history within your family of this being a potential risk. And so it's something that you have to consider if you're going to have a baby. Your body, like she mentioned, could be destroyed or you can lose your life. And we also saw with Serena Williams, she had a life-threatening pulmonary embolism, and the doctors didn't believe her, and that almost cost her her life.
Serena Williams is one of the greatest athletes of all time, but in 2017, we almost lost her after she gave birth to her daughter. This plays into conversations that we've been having over the last couple of years about the higher mortality rate for black birthing parents in the US and also the UK. Serena recently shared her experience with Elle magazine. In 2010, she found out she had a higher risk of blood clots, and after giving birth to her daughter, she experienced some strange symptoms, but she also felt that the hospital staff weren't that concerned, even when she kept asking to have a scan on her lungs. Eventually, she was found to have blood clots in her lungs and luckily was able to get treated. In the article, she says, "Being heard and appropriately treated was the difference between life and death for me. I know the statistics would be different if the medical establishment listened to every black woman's experience." In the UK, black birthing parents are 4 times more likely to die during childbirth than their white counterparts, and in the US, it's almost 3 times as much. And many experts feel like these stats are preventable. We need to get to the root of the bias and stamp it out, and we need to look at the other factors that cause these disparities in healthcare.
And so we know minorities have that higher chance of dying during childbirth because of racist practices and ideas about what minorities can and can't take and whether their pain threshold is average. And so it can cause them death. And so it's another thing that women of color have to think of when they decide, I'm going to have a child. And if they can have access to a doctor that will believe them or choose a doctor that will give them that healthy experience when having a child, because not everyone has the money to afford the best doctor and go to the best hospital when they're going through having a baby. So there's that aspect of your life, your health. It could be in danger depending on your social status. So we see that cost of living is up. It's not the same as it was back when only the man was bringing in money for the household and taking care of the house. Inflation is all the way up. We need 2 people to have a job in order to live a comfortable life and let alone have a child. Children aren't cheap. children are not cheap. They cost money. They need to be fed. They need food. They need school. They need after school. They need plenty of things, and these things are not free. And so with women coming into the workplace, sometimes, most of the time, this is a necessity. Not everyone is going to have a husband or wife that can fund the full family's needs, that's going to be able to pay for all the family's needs. Both parents are going to need to work. But women face a motherhood penalty. When women have children, research has shown that there is a 4% decrease in their pay or penalty to their pay per child that they have. And so you are going to, and potentially you can even lose your job if you were not fortunate enough to be in one of those jobs that will give you maternity leave. Sometimes you're just axed completely and you're not going to get your job back. And so this is something else that mothers have to think of, and mothers that are not in a fortunate position, this is a huge thing. Like, you can't have a baby if you're not going to have a job, and you're not going to be able to pay for that baby after you have it, especially if you're a single mother, right? So this is things that you have to think about. What if the father leaves? What if he decides that he's not going to stick around? Now you have to take care of that baby alone. And do you have enough money to do that? Is your job compensating you enough? And just the question of, why are women being penalized for something that is natural, that we have to do, that just happens? Like, we have babies. We are not going to be able to work through our whole pregnancy. We need time off. And why is that something that's being penalized? And so on the flip side, we see a fatherhood bonus, where research is showing that they have a 6% raise in their income if they have a child, per child. And this is just, it's not fair that fathers are being rewarded for having children, while on the flip side, women are being penalized for having a child. And so this is another factor that might make a mom consider, especially if they're work-oriented or if they have family members depending on them. It might be something that makes them decide, I can't have a child. And if I do, it has to be with a wealthy man that can support me through that event. Completely makes sense, because research backs the fact that it's detrimental to your career. It can affect your career. We also see with celebrities like Keke Palmer and Osaka, they had children at the height of their career, and it slows your momentum down. You can't be in a movie. You can't film a movie if you are pregnant. Keke Palmer had just come out with a blockbuster hit, and then she was pregnant. And so I'm sure that affected her career, and she wasn't able to film as much as she probably would have been able to had she not been pregnant. And of course, like, that's the decision that she decided to make, but it's just a very real reality of having a child and having a successful career. And Osaka she beat Serena Williams. She was definitely at the height of her career, especially as an athlete. The effects that it has on your body and getting back up to shape. You might not get back to shape. You might not ever be in the same condition you are pre-birth. And that's a risk that you take as a mother with a career, especially as a athlete. And I think it goes for why people are also scared for Halle Bailey if she's pregnant, because right now it's alleged. She's at the top of her career. She just had The Little Mermaid. Now she's in The Color Purple. It just makes you wonder if it will slow her career down. Now, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. If you decide to have a child and you forego your career for that child, then that's great and more power to you. But like, not every woman wants to do that. And that's another reason why they might have high criteria for having a child, high criteria, or forego it completely. Because in this world, we need money. And some women are just not going to be in the situation to give that up. And if you are fortunate enough to have that baby and give up your career, and you have someone supporting you or whatever it is, then that's great. But not everyone's in that situation. And that's why we might see a decrease in childbirth, because prices are way too high. Prices are way too high. Inflation is up. We are not getting paid enough. So women are going to have to make that choice, and families are going to have to make that choice if we can sacrifice the mother stopping her job. And then another thing that women have to think about is the fact that since child rearing was traditionally on their shoulders and it was something that they did. A lot of the times, a child is going to go to their mother for that safety and that reassurance because it's just something that comes naturally to women since the baby was in their stomach for so long and then they breastfed the baby. The connection between a mother and child is often very, very strong, and we know this. But then we see things like weaponized incompetence. I've seen plenty of videos on TikTok about this, especially in this week.
What? Okay. Yeah, dude.
And so when you have a father that is making you delegate tasks as a mother, this is very, very taxing. And this makes the job even more stressful. When we see a dad not being present in situations where he should be, this is very, very taxing. And we know divorce rates are up, and oftentimes it's cited because there's an emotional burden on women. And I think that this is an emotional burden. If you have to be a manager, if you have to delegate, if you have a partner that is making you feel like a single mother, then there's a problem there and the burden will tell. If he was just gone, even that would help. Rather you just not be there, but me having to be your manager or even potentially just watch as you are zoned out, as I'm taking care of the kids, that's a problem. And regardless of if the second video was satire or not, it comes from a real place. And this is experience that mothers have all the time. Otherwise, we wouldn't relate to it. We wouldn't laugh at it. It wouldn't make sense, right? So the joke comes from a real place. And this is something that mothers are experiencing, this emotional burden of, having to take care of the children, having to be that safe space for women. And while that might have been something that was easier back when we knew at least the man was the one bringing in the money, and we didn't have to worry about having a job, and we didn't have to worry about all these other things, knowing that women nowadays are having 10 roles on their back. They have a job, they're a mother, they're a manager. Like there's all these things that they have to do. They're teaching, like this is how you change a diaper. You have to change it like you do. Like, why am I teaching you how to be a father? This is something that you also should be doing. It's not just the women's role. And I think men are scared of the role because it's traditionally feminine. And if they have fragile egos, they won't take that role of being a father as easily as a woman takes being a mother. Because there is still that insinuation that child rearing is for a woman. That's a woman's role. That's a feminine role. Women naturally love taking care of babies. Women naturally, and like everyone's learning. It's the first time for everyone. So it's not necessarily just to say like it's natural. You had the baby. You were building a connection with the baby for 9 months. That's why it comes a little bit more natural when the baby's there. But that's not to say a man can't, from that moment, and even when they're in the mother's belly, try to have a connection with the baby. Because they can. They can try to have a connection with the baby and do everything that they can to feel connected and take on that role as a father and not feel as though they need to ask for the woman to delegate them jobs. What do I need to do? Can I change the diaper? Like, just do it. And that's a stress, and it can lead to divorce, and it can be detrimental to the relationship. And so some women might not want to have a baby because it can destroy their relationship. And it can bring more burden onto their plate. And they already have as many burdens as men have. And sometimes having a child does not end up being an equal burden. It ends up being just solely the mother's job and the mother's role and something that they have to deal with while the husband life isn't really changed. He gets a raise. He's sitting back and he's relaxing. He might have even some more me time because she's busy running behind those kids. Like, it's very much given for him. Life just got a little bit better. For her, life just got a bit harder. So makes sense why that might be that's probably one of the biggest reasons why women opt out from having children, unless, the man's financially well off and they can get nannies and they can do this and they can do that. And that's a big one. And so we see this built up energy of resentment that women have toward men when it comes to childbirth because it's unfair. And society does not give you a trophy for being a mother. They might say, oh, it's the hardest job, it's the toughest job, but we're getting decrease in pay, but we're even more stressed than we were before. But I haven't dressed up and looked nice in months. You're telling me one thing, but life is showing me another. And women can see that, like, we're not blind. So while they may say it's this gift and this great thing, completely agree. And I think it's probably a beautiful experience. But in the end of the day, we have to be realistic. And I think there's that resentment that men are not taking their half of that burden. If you've decided to have a child together, why aren't you taking on your responsibility and doing your half of the bargain? We need to see men accepting that role and not shying away from it because it's deemed traditionally feminine, but deciding that this is something that if they decided to have a child, that they can do and they can learn and they can take that role on just as much as a mother can take on the role, and they can help the mother just as much as they possibly can because they already carried that baby for 9 months. Like, clean up that poopy diaper, take care of those kids at the restaurant, like, help your wife out. Just because she's the one that had the baby does not mean that you are excluded from taking care of the kids thereafter. You can help just as much. It's not a feminine role. Both people can do it. And both people are going to have to do it, especially with the way the world is now. It's hard to be a single parent. And I think we all know that. It's hard to be a single parent. We can't have 2-parent households where it might as well just be one. It might as well just be one. That's messed up. And it's a shame for the kids and it's a shame for the wife. There's a lot of issues and there's a lot of things that will need to be done for childbirth to go up. I think number one is prices and inflation. And I think that's why in the end of the day, she's asking for $315 because these prices are way too high. So I think that's probably the number one thing. And I think number two is that men have to take on the responsibility of fatherhood more seriously, and they need to also learn. And there's great fathers out there, and there's like plenty of role models that men can look after on how to be a great father. And so find a model, find a role model, do what you need to do to be a good father. Take that role seriously. Like, it's not a joke. We need to work together as a relationship. We are all responsible for ourselves. We each have that burden to bear, and not one person is the manager. It's not just the woman that's a manager. It's not just the man that's a manager. You both need to be able to lead yourself and then come together as partners and then work together from there. If one person needs to be led, we have a problem. You should be able to lead yourself because in the end, we are individuals. And then you could come together and work together as a team. We need some teamwork because the relationship between men and women in society is breaking right in front of my eyes. I hope that was good. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Happy holidays.